Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Daniel, I want to expand a little bit on the weekly column that I put out this week, and it's, of course, posted on the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And it's a subject that I've talked about a whole lot, during the campaign. And I try to push on this because to me it's so important. That is a distinction between property rights and economic liberty versus social liberties. And it seems like the consensus in the world today in the United States is that they're two entirely different things. But to me, liberty is liberty. My claim has also been that something happened maybe 100 years ago when we moved into the progressive era. They moved into the progressive era by going backwards. And of course, now there's a big distinction. You don't have the right of free speech, in your advertisements, and economic liberty is one thing differently. Some people defend personal liberty, personal relationships. At the same time, they despise personal choices in economic activity. But I think it's pretty important that we distinguish these things. And I don't know how much you thought about this, but to me it's pretty important that we sort of follow up on this and maybe explain it in terms of some special issues.
How many times, if we had a dime for how many times people said, Ron, I love your economic policy, but you're so wrong on foreign policy, or even social policy. It's this distinction somehow that.
But all of a sudden it comes together when they think about it. Let me talk a little bit about the First Amendment, because I think we can find some answers in the First Amendment, and I think we're going to put that up here in a second. But the First Amendment starts off, I think it's great. Congress shall write no law. So if they don't write law, they're not going to regulate personal behavior, non-violent, if there's no aggression, and they're not going to regulate economic activity. But today, we're a long way from this Congress shall make no law. Congress writes a lot of laws, and sometimes they just are absent on this law writing business, because who all is writing laws now today? Because we have the executive branch writing laws, the judicial branch writing laws. We have executive, but what about the laws, written by international organizations? They say any treaty is the law of the land, which is an overstatement, of course, too, because you don't sell out the Constitution because you sign a treaty. But we are inundated with laws and regulations, but the people themselves, don't have much say on it. Congress has the right to repeal some regulations and take back some of their authority. But how often do you recall that Congress actually did this when I was in office? Not very often.
Not very often at all. And it's actually, if anything, it's gotten worse. Look, we've been at war with Syria for over a year now, and Congress has been running and hiding and cowering, afraid to do anything about it. The only time they pop up and want to do something is when they want to kill the Iran deal or something.
See, I think to have a free society and have civil liberties, understanding the First Amendment is important, because they talk about religious freedom and assembly and press and petitioning, and this is all very important. But two basic principles I think that we can't forget about, and the protection is there in the Constitution, if you look also to the Fifth Amendment, and one is property. And the other, if you have a voluntary society, if you have civil liberties, you have voluntary contracts. So those two things, it seems to be forgotten, because property ownership seems to be irrelevant. I used to joke, but it's no joke. And that is, we don't own our property anymore. I mean, all you have to do is think about the EPA, how they come in and you get all these permits and to do what you can. It isn't that the property use is restrained when you do damage to your neighbor's property. It's that they preempt it and say, well, you get permission from us before you can use your property. And then we have to pay these onerous taxes, so we pay rent on land that the government regulates, and so private property ownership, I would say, is pretty weak in this country right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but on the contracts, there's been a lot minimum wages. You know, this is a voluntary contract, and you know, it's always you know, I can understand why people say, well, they're only making $3 an hour. You got to raise their minimum wage, and everybody will be happy. But have you seen recently a few of these times when they raised the minimum wage? In one tech company, they gave everybody $72,000 or something, but the ramifications were surprising. The people who had already earned $72,000, very resentful to the people who got it because a rule said that they would get equal pay.
And this artificial rise of the minimum wage is inadvertently hurting the economy, but helping technology in a way because, for example, in the fast food industry, the biggest thing is automation. You know, you'll go to a McDonald's soon and just punch in a couple of numbers and your burger will come out. You don't need a person at all.
But this is a good example of how they, you know, get involved in economic intervention, and they think that's separate. But what about the principle that we all have a right to take a job voluntarily with somebody if we have an agreed upon wage? So if a 16-year-old or 18-year-old or anybody who really wants a job and you offer them a job at $5 and his eyes brighten up, he says, that's better than, you know, not working. I want the job for $5. And the businessman says, oh, I'll take a risk with you because you have no training. And they put him on. It's illegal. So, you know, the economic law comes in and violates the civil liberties of those individuals to make that agreement.
I think what in your column, which really made it very clear the interconnection between personal liberties and financial liberties, economic liberties, was the issue of the IRS and the granting of C3 status to nonprofits.
Yeah, and of course the answer to that economically is get rid of the IRS and don't have this and don't arbitrarily say, we're going to give you exemption if you do such and such. So there again, one is an economic argument, and then we're going to prevent you from speaking out or lobbying against and petitioning against government, when the Constitution there obviously wants to petition, wants you to be able to petition the government. So I think it's a real shame that we've gotten to this point, but you know, the voluntary contracts are something that economically we can see it, but the one group that say, well, yeah, that's good, but you know, sometimes consenting adults do things that we don't like, so therefore we must restrict them. So a good principle would be that we, you know, have no compulsions and no prohibitions. And then have one general rule, that is, when people interact, that they should be able to do whatever they agree to, as long as there's no violence and abuse of underage kids. You know, there should be protection there. But it is so easy to violate civil liberties. This most noticeable incident recently was this religious issue about, does somebody who has religious beliefs that they should not do a cake celebrating a gay marriage? Now, seems like, you know, that shouldn't be too difficult, but do you think it's strictly a religious issue, or is there something more to it than that?
It seems, as you said earlier, an issue of property rights and the ability to discriminate using your own property.
Yes. You know, the one thing is, you know, even on hiring and firing, you know, business people can't discriminate. They can't fire people or they'll get into trouble, or if they don't hire, they can't. So the businessman, if he's in a situation with a worker and it's very, very difficult to fire somebody, the businessman becomes the slave to him because he's putting up with something that he doesn't believe he wants to be involved in, is not economically beneficial, and he claims he has a right to do it. But if the individual, what if they transferred that same authority to the employee? All right, you're employed and you don't like the job and you want a raise and you didn't get it, I'm quitting. Well, if he's not allowed to quit, what's that called?
The military.
Well, the military. But it's also called slavery. You know, but so there's an enslavement on either side, but it's so biased in one way. But you know, on this cake issue, they've used the whole issue. That's their religious belief, and that's important. But that to me isn't the most important thing. It is this idea that all agreements and coming together should be done voluntarily, and it shouldn't be. It should be a First Amendment right, not something to do with religious beliefs. That should be just a minor part of that. But we also see this problem in the distinction between commercial speech and political speech. In office, we very frequently would defend those people who defended vitamins and nutritional products, and there was all kinds of regulations on that. They couldn't say that this, if you take this vitamin, it's going to help you do something else. They don't question, well, is that true or not? It's just that you're not allowed to say it. And so they regulate commercial speech. At the same time, other speech is protected. I don't think there should be any distinction between commercial speech and political speech. So.
Certainly not yet, not made by the government yet.
No, well, that's the big problem. But this issue is going to be around for a long time to come, because it took a long time to get to where we are and muddy the waters so much. And I would think that it has to have a clear understanding about what individual rights are, individual liberties, and that if you have a right to your life and your property, and you have a right to the fruits of your labor, this wouldn't come up. And the founders understood this. I don't think they for a minute thought there was a major distinction between economic liberty and social liberty. But today there seems to be, and it's always people who want to be authoritarians on the right side. Well, they gamble and they do these things like that, and they have behavior. I just don't like what they're doing. And then on the other side, they say, I don't like, it's not fair. We have to regulate the economic lives of everybody. But to me, this is an issue that's going to be around a long time and deserves a lot of thinking. Of course, my argument is that that freedom and liberty actually brings people together instead of the distinctions of people who want to use their liberties differently. We accept it in religion all the time. People have all kinds of religions, and as long as it's not designed to hurt people, some people have no religion. But if they understand the principle of liberty, people can pretty much do whatever they want. And same way, it should be the same with economic policy. If you have economic liberty, you should be able to assume responsibility for how you spend your money and not depend on the government. But the government has lately, in the more recent history, it's designed to protect us from ourselves, protect us economically, and protect and keep us safe. And the only way they can make us safe and make us more moral is by taking away our liberties. And believe me, whether it's the attitude that comes from fighting wars overseas, that they're only protecting us and that's why we have to give up our privacy, or they want to make us better people, it's always the do-gooders that are pounding away to tell us what to do, either in the social or economic sense. People don't have enough confidence on how liberty works, because if they did, everybody would be for it. And it's up to us, because I think it's tragic that we don't sell this message. But this message is going to become more appropriate because the failure of the economic system that we put up with for so long, and the failure of our foreign policy is such that we have to look for another answer. The answer can be found in basic moral understanding, the basic concept of liberty. We get guidance from the Constitution, and now we have this overwhelming evidence of the failure of the social system as well as the economic system. So that is the reason that the founders were absolutely correct, that we look toward individual liberty and trust the people to do their very best to use that liberty to the best of their advantage, and that if they have problems and they misuse it, that they're not able to then go to others. Others are not responsible for bailing them out, especially the government. But we unfortunately have not had enough confidence in that, and that of course has been one of my personal goals, is to spread that message. I want to thank everybody today for tuning into the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.